My name is Caroline, and I turned 60 last spring. Most people who looked at me saw only my gray hair, my frail walk, the slight tremor in my hands. They thought those things meant weakness, that I was too soft, too old, too tired to fight. They were wrong, because the moment I heard them in the next room, my son and his wife whispering while they packed my things into boxes like I was already gone, I picked up the phone. My voice was calm, steady, though my heart pounded like a drum. "Hello, Mr. Wright," I said when my banker answered. "I need you to transfer every cent from my accounts. Yes, all of it. Today. Into the trust we set up last year. Effective immediately." I could hear laughter and the thump of cardboard being sealed shut with tape down the hallway. I knew they thought I was helpless, too distracted to notice what they were doing. But by the time they checked the accounts, every dollar was gone. Out of their reach. Locked up tight, where no greedy hand could touch it. And that's when the silence fell. Not the quiet of a peaceful home, but the heavy, stunned kind that comes when someone's perfect little plan shatters into dust. I sat there, still holding the phone in my hand, waiting for what would come next. My son's footsteps echoed down the hall. The door handle rattled. My daughter-in-law's voice was sharp, cutting, furious. The door opened. And then, 3 weeks earlier, none of this had started yet. Back then, I was still sitting at the kitchen table in my little house in Savannah, Georgia, sipping my morning coffee and watching the birds outside the window. It was a simple life. Quiet. I had raised 2 children on my own after their father died when they were young, and now, with both grown and gone, I thought the hard years were behind me. My son, Daniel, lived in Atlanta with his wife, Marissa, and their twin boys. My daughter, Claire, lived out west in Colorado, working as a nurse. We weren't the closest family. Life has a way of pulling people in different directions, but I believed they loved me. I believed that after everything I had sacrificed, love would be enough. But love is a fragile thing when money is involved. The first hint came in a phone call from Marissa. Her voice was sugar sweet, but I could hear the steel underneath. "Caroline," she said, "you know Daniel and I worry about you being alone in that big old house. It must be so hard keeping up with everything by yourself. Don't you think it might be time to move in with us? Just until things get easier." Her words seemed kind, but my gut twisted. I had no trouble keeping up with my little place, and I wasn't ready to give up my independence. "I appreciate the offer," I told her, "but I'm fine here. The garden keeps me busy, and I have my neighbors close by." There was a pause, a tight silence on the line. Then Marissa laughed lightly, as though my answer was just a small obstacle in her way. "Well," she said, "we'll talk about it again soon." And she hung up before I could reply. At the time, I brushed it off. Families worry about each other, don't they? Maybe she truly thought she was helping. But that was only the beginning. A week later, Daniel came down for a visit. He walked through the house like he was taking inventory. His eyes lingered on the antique cabinet in the dining room, on the silver tea set that had belonged to my grandmother, on the framed painting above the fireplace. He touched things that weren't his, and each time, my heart grew heavier. "Mom," he said finally, "have you ever thought about simplifying? Selling the house? Moving closer to us? It would be easier for everyone." "Easier for who?" I asked. His jaw tightened, and he gave a little smile that didn't reach his eyes. "For you, of course. For us, too. You wouldn't have to worry about bills, about upkeep. You know, if something happened." I didn't like the way he said that. If something happened. Like he was already planning for me to be gone. But Daniel was my son, my baby. I wanted to believe. He cared. That night, after he left, I sat in the quiet house and felt the first ripple of fear. Not because I thought I couldn't take care of myself, but because I wondered if the people I loved most in the world had started to see me as a burden. Still, I told myself it was nothing. Just worry. Just imagination. Until the day Marissa showed up unannounced. I was out in the garden, pulling weeds, when I heard the front door open. By the time I came inside, she was standing in my kitchen like she owned the place. Her nails tapped against the counter, and she smiled at me in that same too sweet way. "I was just in the neighborhood," she said. "Thought I'd drop by." But her eyes weren't on me. They were scanning the room, noting every detail, every item of value. That's when the pit in my stomach turned into something sharper. A warning. Something was coming. I just didn't know yet how far they would go. And so, 3 weeks later, as I sat with the phone still warm in my hand and the sound of boxes being taped shut echoing in my ears, I realized the truth. They hadn't come to help me. They had come to take everything. But they had underestimated me. And now, as the doors swung open and their faces appeared, I was ready. The moment the door opened, Daniel's face appeared first. His expression was tight, controlled, but I knew my son well enough to see the storm behind his eyes. Marissa hovered just behind him, her arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. They both looked at me like I was a puzzle they couldn't quite solve. "Mom," Daniel said finally, voice low, "we need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, keeping my hand steady in my lap. My heart was pounding, but I would not let them see fear. "Yes," I said, "we do." Marissa stepped forward, her heels clicking on the wooden floor. "We've been doing everything we can to make this easier for you, Caroline, but you're not making it easy." Her voice was sharp, every word dipped in poison. I almost laughed. "Easier for me? Or for you? What exactly are you doing with my things?" I asked calmly, glancing at the taped-up boxes stacked in the hall. Daniel cleared his throat, but before he could answer, Marissa jumped in. "We're trying to help. You don't need all this stuff cluttering up the place. You'll be moving in with us soon anyway. It's only logical to start packing." "Moving in with you?" I repeated, tilting my head. I don't recall agreeing to that. Silence. Heavy, dangerous silence. Daniel stepped closer, resting his hands on the back of the chair across from me. His knuckles were white. "Mom, you can't live here alone anymore. It's not safe. The neighborhood isn't what it used to be, and you, well, you're not young anymore. We're just doing what's best for you." It was the "we" that struck me. Not "I'm worried, Mom," but "we've decided." As if my life, my home, my future were theirs to plan without me. I straightened my back. "I appreciate your concern," I said evenly, "but I'm not moving. And I'm not helpless." Marissa's laugh was cold. "Helpless? Caroline, you can't even climb the stairs without holding onto the rail. You think you can keep this house up by yourself? You can't. It's too much. You need us." "No," I said, my voice sharper now. "I don't." Daniel's jaw clenched, and I could see the flicker of anger in his eyes. He had always hated when I pushed back, even as a child. "Then what happened to the money?" he asked suddenly. And there it was, the real reason they were here. The mask had finally slipped. Marissa's eyes narrowed. "Yes," she said. "We checked this morning. Every cent is gone." "Where did you put it?" I let the silence stretch. I wanted them to feel it, the weight of their greed, the frustration of their failed plan. "That," I said finally, "is none of your concern." Marissa's face flushed red. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "You don't understand what you're doing, Caroline. That money isn't just yours. It's the family's. Daniel has worked hard his whole life, and those boys, your grandsons, deserve security. Are you really going to hoard everything for yourself while we struggle?" My hands trembled, but not from weakness, from rage. "That money," I said slowly, "was earned by your father-in-law and me. We built it together, with sacrifices you will never understand. It was not handed to me, and it will not be handed to you." Daniel slammed his fist against the table, making the dishes rattle. "You can't keep it from us," he shouted. The air crackled with tension. For a moment, none of us moved. Then, just as suddenly, Daniel took a deep breath and forced a smile onto his face. It was strained, but it was there. "We don't need to fight about this," he said, his tone oily. "We're family. We'll figure it out." But the damage was done. I had seen the hunger in their eyes, and I knew then that this was no longer about family. It was about survival. The days that followed were filled with uneasy quiet. Daniel and Marissa stayed in town, hovering around me like vultures circling a wounded animal. They didn't talk about the money directly again, but their every word carried an edge. One morning, I came downstairs to find Marissa reorganizing my kitchen cabinets. "What are you doing?" I asked. She smiled thinly. "Just tidying up. You really shouldn't be lifting these heavy pots anymore." I said nothing, but inside I was seething. My kitchen, my home, my life. Piece by piece, they were trying to take it from me. Daniel was subtler, but no less dangerous. He asked questions about my will, about my accounts, about what would happen if something happened to me. I deflected each one, but I knew he was keeping score. At night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I had come to this. How the son I had raised with love and sacrifice could look at me and see only a dollar sign. I thought of Claire, my daughter in Colorado. She called when she could, but her job kept her busy. If she knew what was happening, she'd fly here in an instant. But I couldn't bring myself to tell her. Not yet. I wanted to fight this battle on my own. To prove, to myself, to Daniel, to Marissa, that I was not weak. And so I made a plan. The first step was to strengthen my defenses. I called my lawyer, Mr. Bennett, a kind but sharp-eyed man I'd known for years. He didn't ask many questions when I told him I wanted to update my will and add protections to my trust. He had seen enough families torn apart by greed to understand without explanation. "Are you sure about this?" he asked gently. "It could create tension." I almost laughed. "There's already tension, Robert. This is just me making sure I'm not left with nothing." He nodded. "Then I'll draft the papers. We'll make sure everything is airtight." The next step was to prepare myself. Physically, emotionally, mentally. I began walking every morning, even when my legs ached. I started cooking healthier meals, forcing myself to eat even when my appetite was gone. I practiced standing tall, speaking firmly, refusing to let the tremor in my voice betray me. If they wanted a weak old woman, that's not what they were going to get. But just when I thought I had gained the upper hand, the storm broke. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. I had been in the garden trimming the roses when I heard shouting from inside. Daniel and Marissa again. Their voices rose, sharp and angry, carrying through the open window. "You said she wouldn't notice." Marissa snapped. "Now the money's gone and she's on to us." "I didn't think she'd move it so fast." Daniel shot back. "She's old, Marissa. She wasn't supposed to fight back." I froze, the shears clutched in my hand. They thought I couldn't hear. They thought I was too far away. But their words cut through me like a blade. "She'll never give it up willingly," Marissa hissed. "We have to make her." There was silence then. Heavy. Terrifying. And I knew in that moment that their plan had shifted. They weren't just going to pressure me. They were going to try to force me. That night, I locked every door and window. I checked them twice, 3 times. My heart hammered in my chest as I sat by the phone, staring at the darkened house. I thought about calling Claire, about telling her everything, but I stopped myself. No, not yet. This was my fight, and I wasn't done fighting. But as the clock struck midnight and I heard the faint creak of footsteps on the porch outside, I realized one terrifying truth. The battle was no longer coming. It was already here. The sound was faint at first, so soft that I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. A creak, like old wood groaning beneath careful steps. My house wasn't new. Every floorboard knew how to complain, but this wasn't inside. It was outside, on the porch. I gripped the phone tighter, my thumb hovering over the numbers. Call the police? Call Claire? Or sit still and wait? My heart was beating so loudly it felt like the whole house could hear it. Another creak. Then silence. I rose from the chair, moving as quietly as I could, and peeked through the thin curtain by the front window. The porch light cast a dim yellow glow, just enough to reveal the outline of a shadow. A tall figure, standing perfectly still. Daniel. Even from behind the curtain, even in the poor light, I knew my son's frame anywhere. Broad shoulders, the way he shifted his weight slightly to one side. He was standing there, not knocking, not calling out, just waiting. My breath caught in my throat. What was he waiting for? I closed the curtain quickly and stepped back, my chest tight. Maybe he was debating whether to come in. Maybe he was hoping I would open the door. Or maybe, my stomach turned, maybe he was testing me, trying to see if I'd panic. I pressed my back against the wall and forced myself to breathe. In, out, in, out. The footsteps came again, slow and deliberate, moving across the porch. Then down the steps. Gravel crunched under his shoes, and the sound faded into the night. Silence. I stood there for a long time, still clutching the phone, waiting for the sound of a car door or an engine. But nothing came. When I finally crept upstairs and crawled into bed, sleep never came. I lay awake until the morning light streamed through the curtains, my mind replaying that moment over and over. Why was he there? What did he want? And most terrifying of all, what would happen next? The next morning, I decided I needed eyes and ears beyond my own. I drove into town, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, and bought a small set of security cameras. It wasn't easy. Technology and I had never been friends, but the clerk at the hardware store explained the basics patiently. When I got home, I spent the entire afternoon setting them up, muttering under my breath as I struggled with screws and wires. By evening, the cameras were perched like silent guardians over my porch, my back door, and the driveway. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of control. But that peace was short-lived. Daniel showed up the next day, unannounced as always. He walked into the house without knocking, as if he still lived there, as if it were already his. I was in the kitchen, rinsing dishes. He leaned against the counter, watching me. "You didn't sleep last night," he said flatly. My hand stilled under the running water. "How would you know?" He smiled faintly. "You left the porch light on until sunrise." A chill ran through me. "You were here." I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. He picked up a clean mug from the rack, turning it over in his hands. Finally, he said, "I worry about you, Mom." That's all. I wanted to scream at him, to throw the mug against the wall, but I forced my voice to stay calm. "If you're worried about me, Daniel, the best thing you can do is give me space." He set the mug down gently, almost too gently. "That's not going to happen." And then he left. For the rest of the week, the tension grew. Marissa kept finding excuses to stop by, checking in, she called it. She reorganized my fridge, my medicine cabinet, even my dresser drawers. Every time, she smiled sweetly and said it was for my own good. I played along, hiding my anger, keeping my movements calm and steady. But inside, I was building a fortress. At night, I reviewed the footage from the cameras. Twice, I caught Daniel circling the house after dark. Once, Marissa tried the back door, her hand testing the handle before she walked away. They weren't visiting. They were scouting, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they made their move. But there were moments in between the fear and suspicion when my heart softened. I remembered the little boy Daniel had once been. How he used to run into my arms after school, his backpack bouncing, his face flushed with joy. How he used to cry when he scraped his knees, and how he would only calm down when I kissed the wound. Somewhere along the way, that boy had disappeared, and standing in his place was a man I barely recognized. Was it my fault? Had I spoiled him? Had I given too much or not enough? Had Marissa twisted him? Or had the greed already been there, lying dormant? The questions haunted me. But every time I replayed those late-night footsteps on the porch, every time I saw the cold hunger in Marissa's eyes, I reminded myself, this wasn't just sadness anymore. This was survival. One evening, just as the sun dipped low over the rooftops, Claire called from Denver. "Mom," she said, her voice full of warmth. "How are you? You sound tired." I hesitated. For a moment, the truth burned on the tip of my tongue. I wanted to tell her everything. That Daniel was circling me like a predator, that Marissa was slowly stripping my life away, that the money was safe, but they were growing more dangerous by the day. But I swallowed it back. "I'm fine," I lied softly. "Just a little busy." Claire sighed. "You always say that. I wish I could visit more often." "Don't worry about me," I said quickly. "Focus on your work. I'm proud of you." When the call ended, I sat in the quiet kitchen, staring at the phone. Part of me wished she would see through the lie, that she'd get on a plane, show up at my door, and rescue me from this nightmare. But another part of me knew I didn't want rescuing. I wanted victory. The breaking point came the following Saturday. I had just finished watering the garden when I heard voices inside. My front door was locked. I knew it was, but somehow they were in the house again. I froze, gripping the watering can. Marissa's voice floated through the window. "She'll never agree, Daniel. We're wasting time. We need to push harder." Then Daniel, she doesn't know how strong we are. She thinks she can scare us off. but we'll show her. I set the can down slowly, my pulse racing. I could run. I could call the police. But instead, I walked calmly through the back door, wiping my hands on my apron, and stepped into the kitchen. They both jumped when they saw me. You left the door unlocked, Daniel said quickly. No, I replied evenly. I didn't. Marissa's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. I looked at them both, my voice steady. This ends now. You are not welcome in my home without my permission. If you step foot here again without an invitation, I will call the police. Daniel's face turned red. You wouldn't. Try me. For a long moment, the air between us was like a drawn bowstring, taut and ready to snap. Then Marissa smirked. You think you're safe because you moved the money? You think we don't know where you hid it? My breath caught, but I didn't let it show. I'm not afraid of you, I said firmly. And for the first time, I realized it was true. They might come for me. They might try to force me. But I was no longer the fragile woman they thought I was. I was stronger than they knew. That night, I checked the cameras again. And what I saw made my blood run cold. At 2:14 a.m., the footage showed Daniel standing at the back door. The crowbar glinted in the camera's night vision, a pale silver outline against Daniel's dark frame. He stood there for several minutes, motionless, his face barely visible beneath the porch light. He wasn't fumbling or rushing like a thief. No, he was calm, deliberate, almost patient. Then, as if he had been interrupted, he turned and walked away, the tool dangling loosely at his side. I replayed the footage at least 10 times. Every frame burned into my brain. Daniel, my son, standing at my back door with a crowbar. By the time the morning sun rose, I hadn't closed my eyes once. My hands trembled as I brewed a pot of coffee. Each creak of the house made me flinch. I told myself he hadn't actually broken in, but the fact he had come with the intention was enough to shake me. It was no longer just manipulation or cruel words. It was a threat, and threats demanded answers. Around noon, I drove into town, the camera footage saved carefully onto a flash drive tucked inside my purse. I parked outside the police station, sat in my car for nearly 15 minutes, then drove away again. I wasn't ready. If I went inside, if I handed that footage over, I would be setting something in motion I couldn't control. My son, the boy I had raised, the boy I had fed and clothed, could end up in handcuffs. No matter how far he had fallen, he was still mine. Instead, I drove to the library. I hadn't been there in years, but the quiet felt comforting, almost holy. I found a table in the back corner and pulled out a notebook. Step 1, secure the house. Step 2, prepare an escape plan. Step 3, contact a lawyer. I made the list slowly, methodically, forcing myself to keep the letters neat and clear, as if order on paper would create order in my life. When I was finished, I underlined one final line 3 times. Do not let them win. Back at home, I reinforced every lock, adding new bolts and chains. I closed the curtains, set my phone by the bed, and told myself I was ready. But the truth was, I was terrified. Each night felt longer than the one before. Every sound outside sent me rushing to the monitor, checking the cameras. Twice, I saw shadows move in the yard. Once, I heard gravel crunching near the driveway, but the screen showed nothing. I lived in a state of constant dread, waiting for the storm to break. And then one evening it did. It was just past midnight when the sound of glass shattering jolted me upright in bed. My heart slammed against my ribs. I grabbed the phone and crept to the top of the stairs. Down below, the glow from the security light revealed a figure crouched by the back door. Daniel, the crowbar again in his hand. Daniel, I shouted before I could stop myself. Stop. He froze, his face snapping up toward me. For a split second, I saw something raw in his eyes, surprise, maybe even shame. But it vanished as quickly as it came. You can't keep us out forever, Mom, he said, his voice low but sharp. This house, it's ours too. It's mine, I snapped, gripping the railing so tightly my knuckles went white. And you'll never take it from me. For a moment, silence. Then he stood, the crowbar hanging at his side like a weapon he was aching to use. You'll regret this, he said softly. And then he left, disappearing into the night. I stood there shaking until the police arrived, my breath ragged, my body cold. But when the officers asked if I wanted to press charges, I hesitated. I couldn't bring myself to do it, not yet. Instead, I filed a report, made them promise to keep watch, and spent the rest of the night on the couch, too afraid to close my eyes. The next morning, I called Claire. I didn't tell her everything, just enough. That Daniel and Marissa were coming around too often. That I didn't feel safe. Her voice cracked over the phone. Mom, I can come home. I'll take a week off, maybe longer. No, I interrupted firmly. You have your own life. I'll handle this. But I mean it, Claire. I'm stronger than they think. I ended the call before my voice could betray me. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure I believed my own words. That afternoon, Marissa showed up. She was dressed to perfection, as always. Tailored blouse, designer bag slung over her arm. She smiled sweetly, as if nothing had happened the night before. I brought you some groceries, she said, holding up a bag. Thought you could use a hand. I stared at her, my arms crossed. You expect me to believe this is kindness? Her smile didn't falter. It's family. I wanted to scream, to slam the door in her face. But instead, I stepped aside, letting her walk in. Because I realized something. If I pushed them out too quickly, they'd come back harder, angrier, more desperate. But if I let them think they still had a chance, if I played along just enough, I could control the game. So I sat with her at the kitchen table while she unpacked the groceries, nodding politely, sipping the tea she offered. And all the while I was thinking, you have no idea how much stronger I am than you imagine. But the calm couldn't last. 2 nights later, the cameras caught them both, Daniel and Marissa, standing at the end of the driveway, whispering to each other. And then Daniel lifted something from the trunk of their car. A gasoline can. The sight of the gasoline can on the security footage made my blood run cold. I sat frozen in front of the monitor, the glow from the screen illuminating my living room. Daniel set the can on the ground beside Marissa, and they both leaned close together, whispering furiously. Though I couldn't hear their words, the intent was unmistakable. They weren't just trying to scare me anymore. They were planning to destroy everything I had left. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911, my hands trembling. Yes, ma'am. Officers are on the way, the dispatcher reassured me. Stay inside. Lock your doors. I already had. I locked every bolt, pulled every curtain, and stood near the front door with my phone clutched tight, my breath short and shallow. Outside, the 2 of them lingered like wolves circling a lamb. Daniel paced, the can swinging from his hand, while Marissa gestured wildly as though urging him on. When the police cars finally came, their flashing lights cut through the night like salvation. Daniel and Marissa scrambled back into their car and sped away before the officers even stepped onto the lawn. I should have felt relieved, but instead, dread settled heavier on my chest. Because this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. The next morning, I walked through the house slowly, touching the furniture, the walls, the photographs lining the shelves. Each item held a piece of me, of my late husband, of the family we had built together. The thought of losing it all, reduced to ash in a single night, nearly broke me. I called my insurance company and asked about fire coverage. The woman on the line was polite, efficient. She assured me that, yes, my policy would cover damages, but her tone was detached, like she had said the same thing 1,000 times. But this wasn't just a policy. This was my life. When I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the papers I had pulled from the filing cabinet. The house deed, the bank accounts, the will I had drafted years ago, back when I thought family loyalty was unshakable. All of it was in jeopardy. And yet, even through my fear, something else sparked inside me. A kind of fire that didn't burn the house, but burned in my veins. If Daniel and Marissa wanted a war, they were going to get one. For the next few days, I became deliberate with every move I made. I contacted a lawyer, an old acquaintance, Evelyn Grant, who had handled some paperwork for me years back. She was sharp, no nonsense, and when I explained my situation, she didn't laugh or roll her eyes. Instead, she leaned forward, her gaze piercing. If what you're telling me is true, then this isn't just family drama. This is attempted intimidation, possibly even extortion. I slid the flash drive with the footage across her desk. They think I'm too weak to fight. Evelyn plugged it into her computer, watched the grainy video, and nodded. Then let's show them they're wrong. For the first time in weeks, I felt a measure of calm. I had someone on my side. Of course, Daniel and Marissa didn't know I had gone to a lawyer. To them, I was still the helpless mother sitting alone in her house, clutching memories. That illusion was my weapon. So when Marissa came knocking again, this time with a tray of cookies and a smile that could curdle milk, I opened the door as if nothing had happened. "Just thought you might need some company," she said sweetly. I took the tray, thanked her politely, even invited her inside for tea. We sat together in the kitchen, sipping from china cups, while she probed me with questions masked as casual chatter. "Have you updated your will recently?" she asked, her voice dripping with false innocence. I smiled back, steady as stone. "Oh, I've been making lots of updates lately." Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, and I knew she understood the hidden weight of my words. When she left, the cookies untouched, I felt stronger than ever. But strength is a fragile thing. That night, I woke to the sound of my smoke detector shrieking. I bolted upright, coughing, the acrid smell of burning wood filling my nose. My heart thundered as I stumbled out of bed, choking on panic. The hallway was hazy, smoke curling up the walls like ghostly fingers. Somewhere downstairs, a fire was raging. The smoke was thick, biting at my throat, searing my lungs. My heart pounded like a drum as I stumbled toward the stairs, one hand pressed to my mouth, the other dragging along the wall for balance. I could hear the faint crackling below. Hungry flames consuming something, feeding, spreading. "Stay calm," I whispered to myself. "Don't panic." But panic had already set its claws in me. I thought of the photo albums in the living room, the quilt my grandmother had sewn, the small wooden box with my wedding ring tucked safely inside. Everything that tethered me to my past, my late husband, my children when they were still mine. I couldn't let it all turn to ash. I grabbed the fire extinguisher by the kitchen door, coughing and stumbling into the haze. Flames licked up from the curtains, spreading along the wall, the orange glow casting twisted shadows across the room. "Not my house," I growled, pulling the pin and blasting the foam. My hand shook, but I pressed on, sweeping the extinguisher back and forth. The fire hissed, resisting, but slowly, it died back. Smoke still hung heavy, but the crackle of spreading flames had ceased. I leaned against the wall, wheezing, tears streaming from my burning eyes. My body felt heavy, weak, but I forced myself to my feet. I had stopped the fire, but it wasn't an accident. Someone had tried to burn me alive. When the fire department arrived, I explained through coughs what had happened. They checked the walls, tested the wiring, examined the scorched remains of my kitchen curtains. Finally, one of the firefighters came over, his helmet tucked under his arm, his expression grim. "Ma'am, this wasn't electrical," he said flatly. "There was accelerant on the fabric." I closed my eyes, the truth hitting me like a hammer. It wasn't just a scare tactic anymore. It was attempted murder. The police came again, notebooks ready, faces serious. I gave them the same names I had given before. My son Daniel and his wife Marissa. They wrote it down, nodding, but their eyes flicked with doubt. Family disputes. Hard to prove. No direct evidence. I knew what they were thinking, even if they didn't say it out loud. Just an old woman caught up in drama with her kids. But I wasn't imagining things. I had the footage of the gasoline can. I had the fire. And I wasn't going to let them dismiss me. When they left, promising an investigation, I called Evelyn, my lawyer. "They tried to burn me out," I said hoarsely. "And the police aren't moving fast enough." There was silence on the other end, and then her voice, low and steady. "Then we move faster." The next few days were a blur of meetings and signatures. Evelyn helped me set up accounts the kids didn't know about, safe keeping my assets far from their reach. We tightened up my will, redirected my pension, and put my deed into a trust they couldn't touch. Each time I signed my name, I felt a little stronger. They thought they could scare me into surrender. Instead, they had built me into steel. Still, the nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, the smell of smoke still lingering in the air, the faint scorch marks on the kitchen walls a haunting reminder. I kept a baseball bat by my bed. I checked the locks twice, sometimes 3 times before sleeping. The silence of the house was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, loaded, like it was waiting for the next strike. One evening, as I sat knitting by the fire, the irony wasn't lost on me. I heard footsteps outside the window. Slow, deliberate. I froze, my needles pausing mid-stitch. The porch light cast a faint glow through the curtains, but I didn't dare move. Then came the sound, soft, deliberate scratching against the glass. I set the knitting down and reached for my phone with trembling hands. But before I could dial, a face pressed against the window. Marissa. Her eyes wide, her lips curled in a cruel smile. She mouthed the words slowly, deliberately. "You can't stop us." And then she was gone, slipping back into the darkness like a ghost. I didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marissa's face at the glass, her smile like something out of a nightmare. Her words, "You can't stop us," rang in my head over and over again. By morning, my nerves were raw. My hands trembled as I made coffee, the smallest sound startling me. The drip of water from the faucet, the creak of the old floorboards, the groan of the fridge kicking on. I wasn't safe in my own home. And yet, part of me burned with anger. This was my house, my sanctuary, the home my husband and I had built brick by brick, memory by memory. How dare they try to push me out? How dare they think I'd crumble? Not me. Not anymore. I called the police again, reporting Marissa's little midnight visit. "Did she break in, ma'am?" the officer asked. "No," I admitted, swallowing back my frustration. But she threatened me. Well, if there was no forced entry and no physical harm. His voice trailed off, dismissive. I could feel my blood boiling. "Are you waiting until I'm in the morgue before you take this seriously?" I snapped. He muttered something about filing another report. Another piece of paper for a growing stack they probably shoved in some drawer, never to be seen again. I hung up, my chest tight with fury. If the police wouldn't protect me, I'd protect myself. I went down to Main Street that afternoon and walked into a small gun shop. The man behind the counter was in his 50s, with a friendly smile and a belly that hung a little over his belt. His name tag said Tom. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked. "Yes," I said firmly, my voice surprising even me. "I need something for protection." Tom nodded like he'd heard this before. He didn't question it, didn't make me feel like a paranoid old woman. Instead, he patiently showed me options, explained safety measures, even walked me through handling. By the time I left, my hand still smelled faintly of gun oil, and I carried with me a small pistol locked in its case. My heart raced at the weight of it, both frightening and strangely empowering. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a chance. Still, I wasn't reckless. I didn't want violence, I wanted peace. But peace only comes when the wolves know the sheep can bite back. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the gun case beside me, my banker on the phone. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his tone professional but tinged with curiosity. "Are you certain you want to move everything into separate trusts so quickly?" "Yes," I said. "Every cent out of their reach. I don't care if it inconveniences me. I want it airtight." He hesitated. "Your son and daughter-in-law are still on some of your accounts as beneficiaries. Shall I remove them?" "Remove them," I said without flinching. As the papers were filed and signatures confirmed, I felt lighter, stronger. They thought they could wait me out, strip me of everything while I withered away. Instead, I had turned the tables. By the time they discovered what I'd done, it would be too late. Days passed quietly after that, almost too quietly. Daniel didn't call. Marissa didn't show her face. No scratching at the windows, no more footsteps on the porch. For a brief moment, I wondered if they had given up. Maybe the fire, the threats, the intimidation, it had all failed, and they finally realized I was too stubborn to break. But deep down, I knew better. They weren't finished. They were waiting. It was a Thursday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I opened the door cautiously, the chain still latched. only to see Daniel standing there with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Mom," he said, his voice tight. "What do you want, Daniel?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. He glanced down the street nervously, then back at me. "Can we talk?" "Just us. No Marissa." Something in his eyes looked different. Not the greedy, cold stare I'd grown used to, but something else, something softer. Against my better judgment, I let him in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place we had shared countless meals when he was a boy. "I didn't know about the fire," he said quietly, "or what she did at your window." I raised an eyebrow. "So you expect me to believe Marissa acts alone? That you had no idea what your wife was doing in the middle of the night? Sneaking around my house like a criminal?" Daniel winced. I didn't think she'd go that far. She wants the house, Mom. She wants the money. She says it's her right, because one day it'll all be mine anyway." The shame in his eyes almost convinced me. "Almost. You're still standing by her," I said bitterly. "If you really cared, you'd stop her." He looked at me, guilt swimming in his eyes. "I'm scared of her, too." For a moment, silence filled the room. My son, the boy I had raised, protected, sacrificed for, looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Weak. But pity could be dangerous. Pity could blind me. Before I could answer, there was a loud bang at the front door. Daniel and I both jumped to our feet as the wood rattled under the force of the hit. Another bang, harder this time. Then a voice, shrill and venomous. "Open the door, Alice. I know he's in there. Marissa." She was here, and she was furious. The door shook again, harder than before. The chain rattled against the frame as Marissa's voice pierced the air like a knife. "Daniel, don't you dare hide from me." Daniel's face drained of color. His hands twitched at his sides like a little boy caught stealing cookies. "She'll break the door down," he whispered. "Let her try," I said firmly, though my heart thudded so loud I was sure he could hear it. The gun case sat on the counter, still locked, still untouched. I didn't want to use it, but its presence was like a shield, reminding me I wasn't powerless anymore. The pounding grew louder. Bam! 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 "Marissa, stop!" Daniel shouted toward the door. There was a pause. Then, her voice dripped with venom. "Open it, or I'll tell the whole world what your sweet little mother has been hiding." My blood froze. What did she mean? Daniel looked at me, panic in his eyes. "She doesn't mean it. She's just..." But before he could finish, the door burst open with a crack that shook the walls. The chain snapped loose, and Marissa stormed in like a hurricane in heels, her blonde hair wild, her lipstick smeared at the corners. Her eyes locked on me first, narrowing into slits. "There she is," she hissed. "The puppet master. The one pulling strings behind my back." I stood tall, even though my knees wobbled. "Get out of my house, Marissa." She ignored me, rounding on Daniel. "You came here without telling me? You dare sneak off to Mommy like some pathetic child." Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. She shoved him hard in the chest. "You're useless. Absolutely useless. If you won't handle her, I will." Then she turned to me, her lips curling into a smile that chilled my bones. "You think you're clever, Alice. Moving money, playing games, acting like some queen. But I know things. Secrets you wouldn't want Daniel to hear." I swallowed, steadying myself. I wasn't about to let her rattle me with vague threats. "You don't scare me," I said. "Oh, don't I?" She stepped closer, her perfume thick and suffocating. "You want me out of your life? Fine. But I'll make sure Daniel hates you before I leave." "Stop it, Marissa," Daniel muttered weakly. "Quiet," she snapped at him, before turning back to me. "Tell him, Alice. Tell him what you really did with his father's estate. Or should I?" Daniel's eyes darted between us. "What is she talking about?" I clenched my fists. Not like this, I thought. Not in front of her. But Marissa's smirk widened. She knew exactly what she was doing, digging at old wounds, trying to pit us against each other. "Your mother isn't as innocent as she looks," she taunted. "While you were mourning, she was moving pieces around, making sure everything was hers before you could touch a dime." Daniel's face twisted with confusion. "Mom, that's enough." I snapped, my voice rising louder than I expected. For a moment, The house was silent except for the sound of our breathing. Then Marissa lunged. I barely had time to react before her hand was on my arm, nails digging deep. "You'll regret crossing me," she spat, her face so close I could see the madness in her eyes. "Marissa, stop!" Daniel shouted, grabbing at her shoulders. But she wasn't letting go. Her grip was iron, her fury volcanic. I yanked my arm free and shoved her back, harder than I thought I could. She stumbled against the counter, knocking the gun case onto the floor with a loud clatter. Her eyes flicked to it instantly. And in that split second, I knew if she got her hands on it first, everything would spiral out of control. We both moved at the same time. The sound of the case hitting the tile echoed in my ears as Marissa bent down, her fingers clawing at the latch. "Don't you dare!" I yelled, diving forward. Daniel tried to wedge himself between us, but Marissa shoved him aside like a rag doll. Her hands fumbled desperately at the lock, rage blazing across her face. I grabbed the case, yanking it back toward me, my nails scraping against the cold metal. Marissa snarled, tugging the other way. "You think you're strong enough? You're nothing but a dried-up old hag." The insult stung, but it fueled me too. My grip tightened, my whole body straining as we wrestled for control. For a terrifying second, I thought she'd win. She was younger, fiercer, fueled by greed and madness. But then, Daniel grabbed her arms from behind, pulling her off balance. "Enough," he shouted. The case slipped from her fingers and landed in my lap. I clutched it to my chest, trembling. Marissa screamed, thrashing in Daniel's grip. "You coward! Let me go!" Her voice cracked with fury, her face blotched red, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. Daniel held on, his arms shaking as he tried to restrain her. "Stop, Marissa. Just stop." But she wasn't listening. With a wild twist, she broke free of his hold and darted toward the back door. Her heels clicked against the floor, her breath ragged with rage. She threw the door open and turned back, her eyes burning into me. "This isn't over, Alice," she hissed. "You think you've won? You haven't seen what I can do." And with that, she disappeared into the night. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel slumped into a chair, his hands trembling. "She's lost her mind," he whispered. "She's going to come back, Mom. Worse than before." I locked the case back up, my own hand shaking as much as his. "Yes," I said quietly, staring at the door she had stormed out of. "And next time, she won't just come for me. She'll come for everything." And in that moment, I realized the storm wasn't over. It had only just begun, because Marissa wasn't retreating. She was regrouping, and whatever she had planned next, it would be even more dangerous. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marissa's face twisted in fury, her nails digging into my skin, her voice spitting poison into the air. The way she had lunged for the gun case still sent shivers down my spine. Daniel sat at the kitchen table long after she left, his head in his hands. He hadn't said much, just kept shaking his head like a man who had finally glimpsed the truth, but couldn't yet face it. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel safe. It felt like a waiting room for disaster. "She won't stop, Mom," Daniel said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "You know that, right?" "I know," I replied softly, but knowing didn't make it easier. It only made the silence heavier. By morning, the bruises on my arm had started to show, dark purple crescents from Marissa's nails. I pulled down my sleeve to cover them before Daniel noticed, but of course he did. He frowned. I should have stopped her sooner. I shouldn't have let it get that far. "This isn't your fault," I told him. "She chose this path herself." But deep down, I wondered if it really was that simple. Love has a way of clouding judgment, of keeping people chained to those who hurt them the most. Daniel wasn't blind. He just didn't know how to cut the chains. He looked at me, his voice trembling. "She's going to try something worse, isn't she?" I met his gaze. Yes. The next few days passed in uneasy quiet. Marissa didn't come back to the house, but her absence was almost worse than her presence. It was like waiting for lightning after the first roll of thunder. You knew it was coming. You just didn't know when. I kept the doors locked. I kept the gun case close. And every time the phone rang, I braced myself for her voice. On the third day, the call came. Daniel answered, and his face went pale. It's her, he mouthed to me, before pressing the phone tight to his ear. I watched as he listened, his jaw tightening with every word. His knuckles whitened around the phone. His breathing grew sharper. Finally, he said, "Don't you dare," and slammed the receiver down. My stomach twisted. What did she say? His hands shook as he pushed the phone away. She said she's going to ruin you, Mom. She said she knows things, bank things. She said if I don't come back to her, she'll make sure everything you've worked for is destroyed. I froze. My banker. The accounts. The nest egg I had worked a lifetime to build. She couldn't really get to it, could she? But then I remembered how quickly she had gone for the gun case, how fearless she had been about throwing accusations, how reckless she was when she felt cornered. If she had already dug into our lives enough to know about the money, what else was she capable of? Daniel grabbed my hands. Tell me she's bluffing. I wanted to. I wanted to lie to give him peace, to convince us both that she couldn't touch what was mine. But I had lived too long, seen too much. Marissa wasn't bluffing. She was warning us. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my old leather checkbook, bank statements spread out in front of me. Every dollar I had was in those accounts. My retirement, my safety net, my security. And if Marissa had even a sliver of a way to get close to it, she would drain me dry without a second thought. The phone rang again, making me jump. Daniel grabbed it before I could move. He didn't say hello, he just listened. His face turned pale again. Then, slowly, he handed the phone to me. My heart pounded as I pressed it to my ear. "Hello, Alice," Marissa purred. Her voice was calm now, almost sweet, and that made it worse. "I just wanted you to know. Bankers are such chatty people if you ask the right questions. You might want to check on your accounts before it's too late." Click. The line went dead. My hand shook as I put the phone down. Daniel looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "What do we do?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached for my cell phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. My banker in Phoenix, Mr. Wallace, a man who had known me since before Daniel was born, who I prayed would still remember where loyalty belonged. He picked up on the second ring. "Alice? It's been a while. I wasted no time. I need to move everything. Today. All of it. No one, and I mean no one, can touch it except me." There was a pause. Then his voice grew serious. "Understood. I'll start the process immediately. Where should I transfer it?" "Somewhere safe," I said. "Somewhere only you and I know." "Consider it done," he replied. I hung up and finally looked at Daniel. "She thinks I'm weak," I said quietly. "But she doesn't realize I've fought harder battles than this before. And she's not taking a cent from me." The next morning, the confirmation came through. Every cent was gone from the accounts she thought she had access to, tucked away in places she would never find. But before I could feel relief, Daniel's car alarm went off in the driveway. We rushed outside to see the windshield smashed in, glass glittering across the pavement. And there, spray painted across the hood in thick red letters, was one word: thief. The red paint glared back at us under the morning sun, bold and ugly across Daniel's car. Thief. The word burned itself into my mind, and for a second, my knees almost gave out. Daniel clenched his fist so tightly I thought his knuckles would snap. He rushed to the car, running his fingers over the broken windshield, glass cutting into his palms without him even noticing. "She did this," he muttered. His voice was low, dangerous. "She's losing control, Mom." "Yes," I whispered, pulling him back before he hurt himself worse. "And that makes her more dangerous than ever." The neighbors came out, curious and cautious. Mrs. Jennings from next door peeked over her fence, her eyes wide with pity. "Do you want me to call the police?" she asked gently. Daniel shook his head, his jaw set. "No, not yet." But I knew why he said that. The law didn't protect people like us, not really. Marissa was clever. She'd twist the story, paint herself as the victim. Dana would get dragged down with her. And me. At 60, no one wanted to hear a grandmother's word over a pretty young woman's tears. No, the law wouldn't save us. Later that evening, Daniel sat at the table, nursing the cuts on his hands, his expression dark. "I should have let Mrs. Jennings call the cops," he said bitterly. We can't keep letting her terrorize us. I sat across from him, folding and refolding the same napkin just to keep my hands busy. The police can't protect us from her kind of fury. They'll just file a report and move on. He looked up sharply. Then what do we do? Wait for her to come crashing through the door again. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. We don't wait. We prepare. His eyes softened then, searching mine. You're not afraid anymore, are you? I gave a small smile. Oh, I'm still afraid, Daniel. Fear keeps us alive, but I won't be paralyzed by it. The phone rang again that night. Daniel went rigid, but I lifted the receiver before he could. Hello, Alice, Marissa cooed, her voice sugar-sweet. Do you like my little message? Everyone should know who the real thief is. I closed my eyes. Stay away from my family, Marissa. Oh, darling, she laughed, soft and cold. It's too late for that. You stole from me. You turned Daniel against me. You think you can hide money from me? From me. You don't know what I'm capable of. And then, in a voice so low it made my blood freeze, she added, accidents happen, Alice. Fires start. Brakes fail. You wouldn't want something tragic to happen, would you? The line went dead. I sat frozen, the receiver heavy in my hand. Daniel hovered, his eyes searching mine. What did she say? I couldn't bring myself to repeat it. Not yet. I just whispered she's not stopping. That night, I checked every lock twice, then sat awake with the old revolver on the table beside me. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. 2 days later, we tried to pretend life was normal. Daniel went to work. I did the laundry, but every sound outside made me flinch. When Daniel came home, his face was pale. He set a folded piece of paper on the table. I opened it and my stomach dropped. It was a photo, a picture of me, taken from outside the window while I sat knitting in the living room. On the back, written in red marker, were the words, "You can't hide." Daniel's voice shook with fury. "She's watching us, Mom. She's stalking the house. This is more than harassment. This is obsession." I gripped the photo, my hands trembling. For the first time in years, I felt truly hunted. But alongside the fear, something else stirred in me, a burning anger. She thought she could break me. She thought she could scare me into running. No, not this time. That night, as the shadows stretched long across the house, I sat at the kitchen table with Daniel. We talked in low voices, almost whispers, as if Marissa were already listening from the walls. "I've been thinking," I told him. "If she wants to play this game, then we need to stop reacting. We need to take control." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I leaned closer, my eyes hard. "I mean she's underestimated me all along. She thinks I'm some old, weak woman she can bully. It's time she learns otherwise." Daniel blinked at me. "You have a plan, don't you?" "Yes," I said firmly. "And it starts with making her believe she's already won." The next morning, I called Mr. Wallace again. My voice was calm, steady. "I need you to prepare some papers. Fake ones. Documents that look like they give Marissa access to the accounts. I want them convincing." There was silence on the other end, then a slow whistle. "Alice, are you setting a trap?" "Yes," I replied coldly. "And I need it to be perfect." That night, before I could even tell Daniel about the plan, we heard it. The sound of glass shattering. We froze. Then another crash. This time, it wasn't just a window. It was the back door. Someone was inside. The crash echoed through the house like a gunshot. Daniel and I froze, our eyes locking. My heart pounded, so hard I could hear it in my ears. The sound had come from the back door. Someone was inside. "Mom," Daniel whispered, standing, his fists clenched. "Go to your room. Lock the door." I shook my head. "No, we face this together." Before he could argue, another sound tore through the silence, footsteps. Heavy, slow, confident. "Caroline," a voice sang out from the darkness. It was her, Marissa. I grabbed Daniel's arm before he could charge toward the noise. "Wait," I hissed. My mind raced. She wanted us rattled. She wanted us panicked. And I couldn't give her that satisfaction. The revolver sat on the table where I'd left it the night before. I slid it into my palm. My fingers shook, but I forced them steady. "Stay behind me," I whispered. We crept toward the kitchen. the sound of glass crunching under Marissa's shoes growing louder. The back door hung open, its frame splintered. Cold night air seeped in, carrying with it the smell of danger. Then she stepped into view. Her hair was wild, her eyes glinting with madness. In her hand, she held a crowbar, swinging it loosely like a toy. Well, well, she purred. Home sweet home. Daniel lunged forward, but I blocked him with my arm. Marissa, I said firmly, my voice stronger than I felt. Leave. Right now. She laughed, tilting her head. Or what, Grandma? You'll bore me to death with one of your sermons. Her eyes flicked to the gun in my hand. Oh, she grinned. How precious. Caroline thinks she's Annie Oakley. Daniel stepped up beside me, his voice low and furious. Put the crowbar down, Marissa. This is breaking and entering. She ignored him, taking a slow step closer. You both stole from me. You think you can lock me out of what's mine? Daniel, baby, I gave you everything. Her voice cracked, shifting from rage to something almost desperate. You were supposed to be mine. My son flinched at her words, but I stood my ground. Daniel was never yours to own, and neither was my money. For a second, her mask slipped. Her smile faltered, her eyes blazing with hate. She lifted the crowbar. Then I'll take what I deserve, she spat. My finger tensed on the trigger. But just as I steadied my aim, a sudden noise erupted outside. The screech of tires pulling into the driveway. Headlights flooded the kitchen through the broken door. Marissa spun around, startled, her grip faltering on the crowbar. Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. He yanked it out, glanced at the screen, and cursed under his breath. It's Trevor, he muttered, naming his best friend. Trevor's car. Trevor's timing. The headlights cut through the tension like a knife. For the first time, Marissa looked unsure. She backed up a step, her eyes darting between me, Daniel, and the door. This isn't over, she hissed. You can't shut me out forever. And with that, she bolted through the broken door, disappearing into the night just as Trevor's knock echoed at the front. My knees buckled, and Daniel caught me before I hit the floor. It's okay, Mom. She's gone, he murmured, though his voice trembled with rage. But I knew the truth. She wasn't gone. Not really. She was just regrouping. Later that night, after Trevor helped board up the door, Daniel turned to me. We need to end this, Mom. She's not going to stop until, he broke off, swallowing hard, until one of us gets hurt. I looked at the revolver still clutched in my hand, the weight of it heavier than ever. No, I said firmly. We won't wait for her next move. It's time to set the trap. And so, with the shards of glass still scattered across my kitchen floor, I pulled out my phone and dialed Mr. Wallace again. This time, my voice carried no hesitation. Prepare the fake documents, I said. By tomorrow, because if Marissa wanted war, I was finally ready to give her one. The morning after the break-in, the house still smelled of broken wood and cold night air. Every creak in the hallway made me twitch. Every shadow felt like Marissa was hiding inside it, waiting to strike again. Daniel had barely slept. I saw it in his bloodshot eyes as he hammered the last plank over the busted door. He worked like a man possessed, sweat dripping, jaw locked. We can't live like this, Mom, he said finally, tossing the hammer down. We can't just keep patching things up while she keeps tearing them down. I know, I replied quietly, though my voice carried steel. That's why we're not just patching things anymore. We're going on the attack. By noon, I was sitting across from Mr. Wallace again, this time in his small law office in downtown Columbus. His shelves were lined with thick books, each one full of rules that people like Marissa loved to bend until they broke. She'd broken last night, I told him, crowbar in hand. If Trevor hadn't shown up. I stopped, my throat tight. Wallace frowned, scribbling notes. That's escalation. She's unraveling. That's why we move now, I said firmly. I want the papers ready today. Make them look legitimate. Every signature, every stamp. I want her convinced she's finally won. He leaned back, tapping his pen against the desk. You're playing a dangerous game, Caroline. If she realizes they're fake too soon. She won't, I cut in. Marissa's greed is louder than her common sense. That evening, I spread the stack of forged documents across my kitchen table. They looked perfect: deeds, account statements, even a bogus trust fund outline. All neat, official, stamped. Daniel stared at them with a mix of awe and unease. Mom, this could actually work. It has to, I said. My fingers brushed across the papers. She's convinced she's the smartest in the room. That arrogance is going to bury her. The first move was to make sure the bait landed exactly where she'd find it. Daniel sent her a message, short and sharp. You wanted what's yours? Meet me tomorrow. I'll hand it over. Minutes later, her reply buzzed back. About time. Don't make me wait. The next day, Daniel and I drove to an abandoned strip mall on the edge of town. The parking lot was cracked, weeds breaking through the asphalt. Perfect. Wide open. No place for secrets. I clutched the folder of forged documents in my lap, every nerve buzzing. Remember, I whispered, we don't show fear. We let her believe she's in control. Daniel nodded, his hands tight around the wheel. We didn't wait long. Marissa's car screeched into the lot, dented on the side from some past tantrum. She stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses, though the sky was cloudy, and a smirk that made my blood boil. Well, well, she drawled, strutting toward us. Finally decided to stop playing games? Daniel got out first, folder in hand. I followed, standing just behind him. These are the documents, he said evenly, holding the folder out. Everything you wanted. Her eyes lit up. She snatched it from him like a child grabbing candy. Flipping through the pages, she muttered under her breath. Bank statements, deed transfers, trust. Oh, Daniel, you do love me. Her laugh was sharp and ugly. I kept my face blank, but inside my pulse hammered. She believed it. She actually believed it. For a brief second, I thought she'd run straight to the bank. But instead, she did something worse. She looked up at Daniel, her lips curling into that same venomous smile. You did the right thing, baby. Now that the paperwork's here, I can finally make things official. You, me, without mommy always in the way. She turned her gaze to me. You'll be out of his life for good soon, Caroline. Enjoy what little time you've got left. Her words sliced deeper than the crowbar ever could. Marissa slid the folder into her bag, turned on her heel, and strutted back to her car. The engine roared, and within seconds, she was gone, dust kicking up from the cracked lot. Daniel let out a long, shaky breath. She bought it. Yes, I said slowly. My eyes were still on the horizon, where her car had disappeared. She bought it. But even as relief washed over me, dread crawled in right behind it. Because if she really believed she had my money, my house, and my accounts, she wouldn't just gloat. She would act. And that meant the storm was only just beginning. That night, back at the house, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening for every sound. Daniel knocked softly on my door around 2 a.m. Mom, he whispered, stepping inside. She's making calls. I saw the alerts on the phone line. She's calling banks, realtors. She's already moving. I sat up, my stomach twisting. Then it's begun. He nodded grimly. She thinks she owns us now. I stood, walked to the window, and looked out into the dark street. My reflection stared back at me, pale and determined. They thought I was too weak to fight, I said quietly, more to myself than to Daniel. But this time, my voice didn't shake, because the truth was, I was just getting started. And as if the universe wanted to prove my point, headlights flickered outside again, this time stopping in front of my house. Daniel tensed beside me. It's her. I pulled the curtain back, just enough to peek. The sight made my blood run cold. It wasn't just Marissa. She wasn't alone. The beam of headlights sliced across my living room walls like a warning. My heart thudded as I stepped closer to the window, careful not to be seen. Daniel was right behind me, tense, fists clenched. It wasn't just Marissa's car idling at the curb. Another vehicle, a beat-up black pickup, rolled in right behind her, its muffler coughing smoke into the night. 2 doors opened, and out stepped 2 men I had never seen before. One was tall and wiry, his hair shaved close to his skull, a cigarette glowing between his fingers. The other was heavier, with tattoos winding up his forearms and a swagger that screamed trouble. Marissa, in her smugness, stood between them, pointing toward my house like she was unveiling a prize. They're not here to talk, I whispered. Daniel's jaw tightened. She brought muscle. The kind of muscle you hire when you want something taken by force. The three of them stood under the street lamp, conferring in low voices. Then Marissa laughed, that awful laugh that always made my skin crawl. She pointed again, and this time, one of the men slapped his palm against his fist as if to say, "Easy job." Daniel's hand brushed against mine. "We should call the police." "They won't come fast enough," I murmured. I made my decision in a heartbeat. "Lights off," I whispered, pulling him toward the hallway. "We're not giving her the satisfaction of walking right into us." We slipped into the shadows as their footsteps crunched closer across the driveway. The sound of gravel under boots echoed in my ears like a countdown clock. Daniel gritted his teeth. "We can't just let them in, Mom." "No," I whispered, reaching for the small baseball bat I kept tucked by the stairs. "We're not letting them in. But we're not running either." The first bang rattled the front door so hard the glass panel shook. "Open up, Caroline." Marissa's voice sang through the wood, dripping with mockery. "We've got unfinished business." Another slam, harder this time. One of the men growled something, and then came the metallic sound of a crowbar scraping against the doorframe. Daniel's chest heaved. "She's trying again." "Yes," I said softly, gripping the bat tighter. "But this time I'm ready." The noise stopped. Silence. Then a side window cracked. I spun just as a shadow slithered through the blinds. Daniel lunged forward, knocking the intruder back before he could climb all the way in. The man cursed, crashing against the siding outside. "Get her out here." Marissa shrieked. "Give me that paper." Now. My heart pounded, but beneath it was something else, something fierce. Rage. I stormed to the door, yanked it open just enough, and shouted into the night. "You want my life so badly, Marissa? Come and take it yourself." The night froze. For a moment, everything went still. Marissa stepped forward from the curb, her sunglasses gone, her eyes burning wild. "You think you can outsmart me," she hissed. "You think you can trick me with your fake smiles and fake papers? I'll strip every last thing from you. You'll die with nothing, Caroline. Nothing." The men shifted behind her, waiting for the word. But before she could give it, sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights cut across the houses at the end of the street. Marissa's face twisted in rage. "You called them," she spat. I smirked, though inside my body was trembling. "You think I wouldn't be ready?" She cursed, spinning toward her men. "We're leaving. Now." The taller one hesitated. "But now," she shrieked, her voice cracking. In seconds, they piled back into the cars. Tires screeched, engines roared, and just like that, they were gone. When the officers finally arrived, Daniel and I were still standing on the porch, adrenaline buzzing through our veins. We gave our statements, showed the crowbar marks on the doorframe, pointed out the broken window. But as soon as the squad cars left, silence fell again, heavier than before. Daniel turned to me, his face pale. "She's not going to stop, Mom. Not until she's destroyed everything." I nodded slowly. "Then we won't stop either." Later that night, long after Daniel had finally collapsed into an uneasy sleep, I sat alone in the living room with the forged papers spread before me. She wanted to tear my world apart. But what she didn't realize was that every step she took deeper into her own greed was another step straight into my trap. I wasn't just defending my house anymore. I was going to take hers from under her feet. But just as that thought hardened in my mind, my phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Silence. Then, a woman's voice, low and trembling, cut through the line. "Caroline, you don't know me, but I know Marissa, and you need to hear what she's planning next." The crowbar glinted in the camera's night vision, a pale silver outline against Daniel's dark frame. He stood there for several minutes, motionless, his face barely visible beneath the porch light. He wasn't fumbling or rushing like a thief. No, he was calm, deliberate, almost patient. Then, as if he had been interrupted, he turned and walked away, the tool dangling loosely at his side. I replayed the footage at least 10 times. Every frame burned into my brain. Daniel, my son, standing at my back door with a crowbar. By the time the morning sun rose, I hadn't closed my eyes once. My hands trembled as I brewed a pot of coffee. Each creak of the house made me flinch. I told myself he hadn't actually broken in, but the fact he had come with the intention was enough to shake me. It was no longer just manipulation or cruel words. It was a threat, and threats demanded answers. Around noon, I drove into town, the camera footage saved carefully onto a flash drive tucked inside my purse. I parked outside the police station, sat in my car for nearly 15 minutes, then drove away again. I wasn't ready. If I went inside, if I handed that footage over, I would be setting something in motion I couldn't control. My son, the boy I had raised, the boy I had fed and clothed, could end up in handcuffs. No matter how far he had fallen, he was still mine. Instead, I drove to the library. I hadn't been there in years, but the quiet felt comforting, almost holy. I found a table in the back corner and pulled out a notebook. Step 1, secure the house. Step 2, prepare an escape plan. Step 3, contact a lawyer. I made the list slowly, methodically, forcing myself to keep the letters neat and clear, as if order on paper would create order in my life. When I was finished, I underlined one final line 3 times. Do not let them win. Back at home, I reinforced every lock, adding new bolts and chains. I closed the curtains, set my phone by the bed, and told myself I was ready. But the truth was, I was terrified. Each night felt longer than the one before. Every sound outside sent me rushing to the monitor, checking the cameras. Twice, I saw shadows move in the yard. Once, I heard gravel crunching near the driveway, but the screen showed nothing. I lived in a state of constant dread, waiting for the storm to break. And then one evening it did. It was just past midnight when the sound of glass shattering jolted me upright in bed. My heart slammed against my ribs. I grabbed the phone and crept to the top of the stairs. Down below, the glow from the security light revealed a figure crouched by the back door. Daniel, the crowbar again in his hand. Daniel, I shouted before I could stop myself. Stop. He froze, his face snapping up toward me. For a split second, I saw something raw in his eyes, surprise, maybe even shame. But it vanished as quickly as it came. You can't keep us out forever, Mom, he said, his voice low but sharp. This house, it's ours too. It's mine, I snapped, gripping the railing so tightly my knuckles went white. And you'll never take it from me. For a moment, silence. Then he stood, the crowbar hanging at his side like a weapon he was aching to use. You'll regret this, he said softly. And then he left, disappearing into the night. I stood there shaking until the police arrived, my breath ragged, my body cold. But when the officers asked if I wanted to press charges, I hesitated. I couldn't bring myself to do it, not yet. Instead, I filed a report, made them promise to keep watch, and spent the rest of the night on the couch, too afraid to close my eyes. The next morning, I called Claire. I didn't tell her everything, just enough. That Daniel and Marissa were coming around too often. That I didn't feel safe. Her voice cracked over the phone. Mom, I can come home. I'll take a week off, maybe longer. No, I interrupted firmly. You have your own life. I'll handle this. But I mean it, Claire. I'm stronger than they think. I ended the call before my voice could betray me. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure I believed my own words. That afternoon, Marissa showed up. She was dressed to perfection, as always. Tailored blouse, designer bag slung over her arm. She smiled sweetly, as if nothing had happened the night before. I brought you some groceries, she said, holding up a bag. Thought you could use a hand. I stared at her, my arms crossed. You expect me to believe this is kindness? Her smile didn't falter. It's family. I wanted to scream, to slam the door in her face. But instead, I stepped aside, letting her walk in. Because I realized something. If I pushed them out too quickly, they'd come back harder, angrier, more desperate. But if I let them think they still had a chance, if I played along just enough, I could control the game. So I sat with her at the kitchen table while she unpacked the groceries, nodding politely, sipping the tea she offered. And all the while I was thinking, you have no idea how much stronger I am than you imagine. But the calm couldn't last. 2 nights later, the cameras caught them both, Daniel and Marissa, standing at the end of the driveway, whispering to each other. And then Daniel lifted something from the trunk of their car. A gasoline can. The moment the tattooed man spotted us, the world shrank to a single word pulsing in my veins. Run. Evelyn's hand was clammy in mine as we bolted from the bench, weaving through families and joggers who turned in surprise. Behind us, heavy boots slammed against the pavement. He's coming. Evelyn gasped. My heart hammered like a war drum. The Ohio River gleamed to our right, the parking lot stretched to our left. We cut across the grass, my knees screaming but my mind sharper than ever. I'd been running from fear for too long. Today, I wasn't running from him. I was running toward Marissa. We ducked under the branches of an oak tree, breath ragged. I pressed Evelyn against the trunk, whispering hard. Do you trust me? She nodded, trembling. Then listen, get to the police station. Give them everything. Tell them Caroline Whitaker sent you. Don't stop for anything. Her eyes widened. What about you? I glanced back. The tattooed man was shoving past a cyclist, eyes locked on me like a predator. I'm going to finish this. Before Evelyn could argue, I shoved her in the opposite direction and stepped out from the tree. The man grinned when he saw me. You're a hard woman to scare. I straightened my spine. You'll find I'm harder to catch. He lunged, but I swung my cane hard across his shin. He stumbled with a curse, and I sprinted toward the truck where I knew the real threat sat waiting. Because if the henchman was here, Marissa was too. The driver's door opened. There she was. Marissa stepped out, immaculate as ever in a tailored coat, her lipstick blood red even in the dull gray light. She moved with the grace of a queen surveying her subjects, but her eyes burned cold. Caroline, she drawled, as if greeting an old friend. How touching. You actually showed up. I forced my breath steady, gripping the envelope inside my coat. You should have left me alone. Her laugh was smooth and cruel. And miss out on the sweetest victory? You're the prize at the end of the game. The one that proves I can take anyone down. Even you. The tattooed man limped back toward her, snarling. Want me to drag her in? Marissa lifted a hand, silencing him. Her gaze never left mine. No. She came willingly. She knows she can't win. I stepped closer, my voice firm. You think this is about money, Marissa? About accounts and houses? No. This is about something you'll never understand. She arched a brow. And what's that? Loyalty. Kindness. The things you threw away the moment you chose greed. Her smirk faltered. Just a flicker, but I saw it. A crack in the mask. You sound just like the others, she said coldly. The ones who begged me for mercy. The ones who swore they had friends, family, people who loved them. Do you know where they are now? Forgotten. Power is all that lasts, Caroline. And I have it. You don't. I smiled then, slow, deliberate. Funny, I whispered, pulling the envelope free, because I have this. Her eyes widened as I held up Evelyn's files. Pages of names, accounts, evidence of years of her scams. You may be powerful, Marissa, I said, voice steady as steel. But today you're exposed. The tattooed man lunged again. I swung my cane with all the strength left in me, striking his jaw. He went down hard. Marissa's composure snapped. You foolish old hag, she shrieked, storming toward me. You think anyone will believe you over me? I'll bury you before you even get to a courtroom. But before she could reach me, voices cut through the chaos. Louisville PD. Hands where we can see them. Red and blue lights flashed across the park. Evelyn, bless her, had run faster than I thought possible. She'd reached the police, given them the envelope, and led them straight here. Officers swarmed, pulling the tattooed man to his feet, snapping cuffs around his wrists. Marissa froze, her fury twisting into something uglier. This isn't over, she screamed as two officers restrained her. Do you hear me, Caroline? I'll destroy you. I'll. Her voice was cut off as they shoved her into the back of a squad car. I stood there, chest heaving, as the sirens wailed and the river rolled on, indifferent and eternal. Daniel arrived minutes later, breathless, panic etched across his face. Mom, are you okay? I turned to him, and for the first time in months, I smiled. Better than okay. It's over. He pulled me into his arms, and I let myself lean against him, just for a moment. The fight had taken so much out of me, but it had given me something too. A reminder that I was not weak. I had never been weak. Weeks later, I sat in the courthouse, watching as Marissa was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit. She glared at me across the room, but I met her eyes without flinching. The judge read the charges: fraud, conspiracy, theft, extortion. Evelyn's testimony sealed it. The files I'd carried under my coat had become the hammer of justice. When the gavel finally came down, sentencing her to decades in prison, the sound was sweeter than any music I'd ever heard. Life after was quieter, but never the same. Neighbors who once whispered about my family drama now brought pies and casseroles, a shame they hadn't seen the truth sooner. Daniel and I rebuilt what we'd lost, not in money, but in trust, in love, in laughter. Some nights I still woke with the memory of Marissa's threats echoing in my head. But instead of fear, I felt something different. Strength, because I'd faced the storm and I was still standing. One evening, sitting on my porch in Louisville, I reflected on it all. They had thought I was too weak to fight. They had tried to pack my life into boxes, to erase me like a name crossed off a list. But when they underestimated me, they gave me the greatest weapon of all. Time to plan. Time to fight back. And when the moment came, I wasn't the one left empty-handed. They were. Every cent, every scheme, every ounce of power, gone. I took a deep breath, the night air cool on my skin, and whispered into the dark. Never again.